I was the sharpest blade in my legitimate sister's hands. She pointed, I struck. Like a rabid dog, relentless, untamed. Outsiders mocked me, and she laughed along. She and Oppos, not even worth a seat at the table. Later, when the crown prince lost the throne struggle and she was exiled to some bitter, barren land. It was the first time she ever knelt before me. Father and his wife, the legitimate madam, were deeply affectionate. Their only treasure, Mengjigi, the legitimate daughter. As for me, a concubine's child. I was the stain on their perfect family portrait. My birth mother was once a lowly maidservant in the household. One drunken night, father laid with her. Afraid his wife would find out, he cast her out immediately. She had no choice but to carry me in her womb, wandering helplessly, until she knelt before the Ministry of Rights and Oppos, Gates. That scandal reached father's political enemies. To avoid being impeached at court, he reluctantly allowed my mother to return, bringing me along. He wore a face black as coal when he gave that permission. Madam resented my mother for daring to lie with her husband behind her back. But the truth. It was all forced. My mother was a mute, frail, and voiceless. She couldn't fight, couldn't cry for help. Father blamed her. Why would you secretly give birth and return? But when she was thrown out, she didn't even have a coin to her name. A mute woman with no means, how could she survive this cruel world? She couldn't even feed herself, let alone afford a doctor. But no one cared. She was just a nameless maid. Even in death, no one spared her a glance. And yet, for the slimmest hope that I might live, she knelt before the gates, clutching me in her arms. The price she paid was her life. They strangled her. Her body was bruised and battered, no part left whole. Father declared to the world she died of syphilis. But since the child is innocent, he'd raise me out of pity. People freely insulted her while praising father's upright character and noble virtue. Thanks to her last stand, I stayed in the household. She no longer had to worry that her 5-year-old daughter would be sold to a brothel. Yet, in name, I was a shunu, a concubine's daughter. In reality, I was no better than a maid. No servants, endless chores. Mother was timid, always yielding. Her only act of courage was for me. Father was cunning, selfish, calculating to the core. And me. I seemed to take after mother, quiet and obedient. But deep inside, I was exactly like him. In 3 months, I stood beside Mengjigi. She, the precious pearl of the household, got anything she wanted since birth. Servants fawned over her, everyone bowed and scraped. My only advantage. I obeyed. Instinctively, immediately. I knew what she wanted before she opened her mouth. Inside the household, her word was law. Outside, among noble daughters her age, who would bend to her whims. That's where I came in. To prop her up. To make her shine. She looked like a fairy, I was rough and common. A beggar girl in her eyes. She voiced an opinion, I praised it. Anyone dared disagree, I'd fight them tooth and nail, turn black into white. She would only need to feign gentle restraint. Once I won the quarrel, she'd scold me for being uncouth. If she was wrong, I bore the blame. Either way, she and her friends would laugh at me in the end. I remained the concubine's daughter, anyone could trample me. But I gained much, even from her leftovers. When she attended the Women's Academy, I followed. I served her, and learned. Whatever the tutor taught, I studied. At night, I burned oil to revise. All her assignments and punishments, I did them. I watched every motion of the noble girls when we mingled. Back home, I mimicked them in front of my bronze mirror, adjusting every expression. Over the years, I shed the image of the beggar girl. And became the fierce dog Mengjigi raised, feared by all. When the crown prince sought a consort, her eyes sparkled with ambition. A daughter must marry to become the noblest woman in the land. But within 3 days, word spread. The crown prince praised Du Xuanxiao, another noble daughter, for her brilliant guqin playing. Soon, a rare instrument was delivered to the Du household, directly from the crown prince. Upon hearing this, Ming Jigi paled and flew into a rage. She had played the demure lady for too long. Now, dark and twisted, she wanted to tear Du Xuanxiao apart. That wretch! Didn't she say she already had someone in her heart? That she wouldn't fight me for the prince. I had foolishly believed her, too. The two girls were the twin jewels of the capital. In talent, Ming fell short of Du Xuanxiao. In beauty, she held the upper hand. They had known each other since childhood, best friends, yet rivals in secret. Fortunately, one only wished to marry the crown prince. The other already had a sweetheart, hoping to wed him at 15. They believed their friendship could endure. But not anymore. That day marked the beginning of their end. I calmly watched Ming Jigi curse Du Xuanxiao, grinding her teeth. When she tired, I brewed tea, knelt, and offered it to her. Calm your anger, sister. His Highness was merely admiring her music. It said he loves women with both beauty and talent. But everyone in the capital knows, you are the most beautiful of them all. Guqin can be learned. Your beauty. Du Xuanxiao could never hope to match. Her rage eased. Beauty was her pride. It had already drawn countless matchmakers to her door. But she held them all in contempt. In secret, she sneered, they dare dream of me. Now, she sat before her mirror, admiring herself. The more she looked, the more pleased she became. Meng Fu Wan, she said, addressing me, what should I do next? I stepped forward. Sister, the crown prince's residence has many dancers. Clearly, he appreciates graceful movement. If you master dance, you'll surely captivate him. She said nothing, pondering. Later, after discussing with her mother, they accepted my suggestion. She could dance, but not well. To amaze the prince, she needed a master tutor. Princess Xuanjia of Suzhou was the best candidate. Her birth mother. The current Empress Dowager. Princess Xuanjia was renowned for her dancing. Back in her day, her skill in the art was unmatched in the entire capital, a fact everyone knew. She had once had a consort, but he had died of illness a few years ago. Since then, she had chosen not to remarry, instead residing peacefully in the scenic city of Suzhou. There were plenty of women who could dance. But Princess Xuanjia, she possessed the noblest status of them all. To catch her I would be to win the Empress Dowager's favor, a powerful boost for Ming Jigi's bid to become crown princess. That was the calculation shared by both Meng Jigi and her mother. Traveling to Suzhou would mean days of exhausting travel by carriage. Meng Jigi simply gave one order, you'll be coming with me. Naturally, I bowed and obeyed, turning away quietly to prepare everything. That very night, a letter left the minister's household, silently, without a sound. After half a month of bone-wearying travel, we finally arrived in Suzhou. Ming Jigi rested for a day. The next morning, she brought several carriages filled with lavish gifts to the gates of Princess Xuanjia's residence. As I expected, we were turned away. I stepped forward to reason with the gatekeepers, speaking every kind word I knew, but not even a flicker of sympathy crossed their faces. Even when I subtly offered silver, they didn't so much as glance. Left with no choice, I returned to Meng Jigi's side. Seeing her face clouded with frustration, I spoke softly. Sister, perhaps we come again tomorrow. If not one day, then 2. If not 2, then 3. The princess will surely be moved by your sincerity. Before leaving the capital, her mother had warned her over and over. Princess Xuanjia is eccentric and doof. She's not easy to please. But endure these months patiently, and you'll surpass Du Xuanxiao and become the only viable candidate for crown princess. More importantly, fail if you must, but never offend her. Ming Jigi swallowed her resentment, forcing a smile as she stepped into the carriage. But the moment the curtain dropped, her face twisted with fury. Just wait. When I sit on that throne. She was not one to forget a slight. No doubt by now, she had already written Princess Xuanjia's name into her private book of grudges. Still, she returned every single day to pay her respects. Every day, the doors remained shut. Every day, she turned and walked away, silent and seething. Her mood worsened with each rejection. And we, the servants, became the outlet for her rage. The maids didn't dare cry in front of her. They wiped away their tears only once her back was turned. I quietly comforted them. I even slipped them a little silver to soften their hardship. Ming Jigi had no idea, her short temper, when no outsiders were around, had long planted seeds of resentment among her attendants. They were low-born, their lives thinner than rice paper. Yet they would become my most loyal allies. Half a month passed. Then, finally, Princess Xuanjia let her in. I followed behind as we entered. It was my first time meeting the princess. So, she said coldly, her gaze landing on Meng Jigi. You wish to learn dance from this palace. That chilling voice, one that had survived the storms of palace life, instantly unsettled the air around us. Meng Jigi dared not breathe too loudly. Her smile carried a hint of flattery, her posture humble. I've long admired your highness's peerless artistry. Today I come to seek guidance, hoping to be accepted as a student. I pray your highness will not find me too lacking. To stay is not impossible, the princess said. Whatever your highness requires, Ming Jigi replied hastily, I will find it for you. The princess's brow furrowed slightly. Realizing she had spoken too eagerly, Ming Jigi quickly corrected herself. I didn't mean it that way. I was merely overjoyed and lost my manners. No matter, the princess said. If you wish to stay, there are two conditions. First, you will remain here for 3 months. During that time, you will obey every command I give. Second, this is not a place anyone can enter as they please. For 3 months, only you may enter. Meng Jigi had mentally prepared for the first condition. But the second gave her pause. Your highness, must even my maidservants and my Shuna sister be barred? The princess's eyes turned icy. All the servants in this residence were hand-picked from the palace. Each one is well-versed in dance. Your maids hardly compare. Unwilling to yield, Ming Jigi pressed on. Then, what about my younger sister? She is not a maid. Her reasoning was clear. Without her maids, at least she would have me to command, to scold when angered. After all, she wouldn't dare offend the princess's own staff. Is it you who wishes to learn, the princess asked coldly, or your sister? Seeing the flicker of impatience in her expression, Meng Jigi immediately backed down. Of course not. I will follow your highness's arrangements. Only then did a trace of amusement reach the princess's lips. This is the first time I've ever accepted a disciple. If you perform well, I shall recommend you to the empress. One light sentence. And every trace of bitterness in Meng Jigi's heart evaporated. This was why she had come to Suzhou. With a single word, the princess offered it. She struggled to contain her joy. I will follow your highness's instructions faithfully. I dare not disobey. All the while, I stood silently behind her, eyes lowered, breath still, as though I didn't exist. Once Ming Jigi was accepted, I led the rest of the attendants away. She didn't even glance at us. Her thoughts still echoed with the princess's promise. She couldn't be bothered with who stayed or who left. As we stepped out of the residence, I turned back once. Saw the smile she couldn't quite hide on her face. And allowed myself the faintest, coldest smile of my own. My dear sister. This is the first grand gift I present to you, do take it well. That afternoon, I disguised myself and led a small group to Shanshui residence. When the gatekeeper saw the token I presented, suspicion briefly flashed in his eyes. He gave me a long look before leading me inside. In the study, the one I had waited so long to meet finally appeared, the third prince. "Sir Nanyan," he greeted. I pulled off my hood. Beneath it was not a man's face, but that of a woman. "It is I said calmly. His expression shifted at once, eyes widening in disbelief. You're a woman. When working outside, it and Oppo's, it's easier to move about as a man. I assumed your highness wouldn't care whether Nanyan was male or female. Was I wrong? For years ago, I had sent him my first letter under the name Nanyan. At the time, the Empress and the Crown Prince were plotting his downfall. Because of my warning, he avoided disaster. From then on, I continued sending strategies. And 3 years ago, he voluntarily left the capital, choosing to settle in the northern outskirts of Suzhou. In the same 3 years, the second prince was stripped of title and reduced to commoner status. The fourth prince broke his leg. The fifth prince became chronically ill. 2 other princes and 1 princess died young in the palace. Several miscarriages were quietly buried. Only the third prince, who had long feigned indifference to power, lived quietly in exile, safe and untouched. Recalling it all, his face was filled with gratitude. Sir Nanyan saved me from great dangers more than once. I shall never forget this debt, and yet. He hesitated before speaking again. Even after 3 years away from the capital, I remember, wasn't Nanyan once the second miss of the minister's household? I knew that was just a polite way of asking. How did a lowly concubine-born daughter possess the ability to change the tides of fate? I smiled faintly. Your Highness, sometimes one's identity is the greatest shield. Who would ever suspect a mere shunu? I've been beside my legitimate sister for years. She loved ordering me about. There were countless errands she sent me on. And with them, I uncovered more than she ever knew. From noble daughters to aristocratic secrets, I know them all like the back of my hand. All these years, following Mingjigi around, helping her spy and gather gossip, I remembered every face, every whisper. From habits to unconscious behavior, I took it all in. Never underestimate a woman. Some secrets no informant could obtain, yet they spill so easily from the lips of a gossipy lady. His eyes softened, suspicion fading into admiration. Lady Meng speaks wisely. It seems I was the foolish one. Please, I said, call me Nanyan. The name Meng isn't safe anymore. He nodded, then asked with sincerity. But why help me? The emperor has many sons, he continued. The crown prince has his powerful maternal clan. The second prince was brilliant. The fourth excelled in both martial and literary arts. The fifth had a silver tongue and knew how to charm. And me. My mother was just a lowly palace maid. She bore me, and was granted the rank of attendant, but died within a year. I have no talents, no titles, no influence. To father, I barely exist. Because, I replied, slowly and clearly, Nanyan believes we are the same kind of people. If your highness knows who I truly am, then you also know of my origins. My mother was a mute servant girl. What crime did she commit? What crime did I commit? The words sank in. Compared to mine, his childhood had been even crueler. In the palace, the number of infants who died young was beyond counting. That he had survived was nothing short of a miracle. As a child, he often starved. Every eunuch and maid had once stepped on his back like a carpet. He didn't want to remember those days, but he never dared forget them. You're right, he whispered. We are the same kind. And those who trampled us beneath their feet, they all deserve to die. I smiled slightly, satisfied. Nanyan wishes your highness great fortune on your journey to the throne. When I left Shanshui residence, I pulled my hood low, cloaking all emotion in the night's shadow. The third prince. That matter was settled. All in the palm of my hand. In the days that followed, I remained at the inn, only occasionally sneaking out in disguise to visit the prince. It was I who proposed that in 3 months' time, the third prince personally escort Mingjigi back to the capital. He hesitated briefly, then agreed. But when I added, "You must petition His Majesty to grant marriage, to wed the legitimate daughter of the minister's household," his face froze, and he instinctively objected. "That's impossible. My father would never allow it," I replied with calm certainty. "Your Highness need only do it. His Majesty will be pleased to agree." "Why?" he asked, baffled. When a man dares snore beside a sleeping emperor, how can the throne tolerate such insolence? The crown prince's faction has grown too bold. The emperor is already displeased. Throughout history, monarchs have always been wary. No father king ever wants to see his son building alliances, eyeing the Daeon throne while he and Oppos is still alive. I didn't need to spell it out. The third prince understood. "But, why would the minister marry off his daughter to me?" he asked. "Anyone with eyes can see he's long planned for Mingjigi to marry the crown prince." I smiled. "But the minister doesn't have only one daughter." His eyes widened and grew deeply uncertain. Still smiling, I leaned in. "There is one more matter I came here to discuss." I stayed at Shanshui residence for 3 full hours. When I left, his face was full of anticipation, as though he could already see the throne glittering before him. Outside, all was silent. My maid, Yushi, couldn't hold it in. "Miss, I saw it clearly." The moment he heard of marriage, he hesitated. "Clearly, he looks down on you." I chuckled softly, unaffected. "I've always known who he is. This is merely mutual use. Nothing more. I never gave my heart, so I expect no sincerity in return. True affection. It's the most useless thing in this world." 3 months later, I saw Mingjigi again. I had been waiting with my people outside Princess Xuanjia's residence. In just 3 months, she had changed drastically. Thinner now, her waist like a willow branch, she walked as if one gust might blow her over. The arrogance once carved into her face had faded, replaced with a smile soft as April's spring breeze. She looked like a blossom just blooming at the tip of the branch, so delicate, so beautiful, one might hesitate to touch. But that illusion shattered the moment she stepped into the carriage. Her expression darkened, fury burning in her eyes. With no warning, she lashed out, kicking the maid kneeling at her feet with brutal force. The maid who had been kicked tumbled backward, both hands clasped tightly over her mouth, too frightened to make even the faintest sound. Even the tears brimming in her eyes, she struggled to hold them in. She knew, if she made a sound, she might not even survive with half her life. I cast a glance at her, then turned to Mingjigi, smiling faintly. "Congratulations, dear sister. You're one step closer to your wish." Mingjigi shot me a cold glare. "How do you know I'll succeed?" I smiled sweetly, like spring breeze in April. "Sister, you've been exceptionally gifted since childhood, quick to learn, highly praised by every tutor. If even you can't succeed, then who in the empire can?" The words struck precisely where she wanted to hear them. I knew her too well. Guiding her emotions was no different than pulling puppet strings. "Humph. At least you're self-aware," she sneered. "Princess Xuanjia has agreed. 1 month from now, she'll return to the capital and personally recommend me before the Empress and His Majesty, as crown princess. Then congratulations again, sister." But if she were truly so elated, why was there still such barely concealed bitterness in her eyes? Simple. The road to that promise had been anything but smooth. Though she was nominally accepted as a disciple, Princess Xuanjia had barely instructed her. Other than a few words of guidance, most of the time she was at the mercy of the palace servants' arrangements. She danced from dawn to dusk. Meals were plain and sparse. The tasks grew harsher with each passing day. And failure meant punishment. At first, Mingjigi naturally refused to comply. She lashed out, demanding to speak with the princess directly. The princess only looked down at her coldly. You question this palace. I wouldn't dare. You wish to become crown princess, and you can't endure this minor hardship. If so, then leave, spare us the trouble. One sentence was all it took. After that, Mingjigi dared not protest again. I knew every detail of her 3 months in the princess's household. That night, I quietly gave a box of ointment to the injured maid. She teared up as she clutched it, gazing at me with gratitude. Second miss, you're truly kind. Kind. Not really. I was merely doing what benefited me most. Just as Mingjigi prepared to return to the capital, the third prince arrived for a visit. Though she never saw him as worth her time, she couldn't exactly refuse him outright. What she didn't expect was that he would personally propose escorting her back to the capital. She froze in surprise. There was no bond between them, not even a polite conversation. And yet now he appeared, uninvited. She tried refusing, once, twice, but in the end, she had no choice but to accept. Afterwards, when it was just the two of us, her mask slipped. What does that third prince want? We've never even exchanged a word. What scheme is he plotting? I considered for a moment, then answered. After 3 years away, his sudden return must mean he's plotting something. Mingjigi scoffed. Him. What could he possibly plot? No background, no talent, what could he want? He should take a good look at himself in the mirror. I quickly nodded in agreement. Sister is right. I suspect he's set his sights on you, trying to use this journey to pull the minister's household into his camp. Her expression darkened. Disdain dripped from her voice. He dreams too boldly. He dares think he can marry me. He should wake up and stop daydreaming in broad daylight. He's unworthy, daring to even imagine me. I took the opportunity to caution her. Sister, this return journey, you should be cautious. I fear he may attempt something vile. If he has his way, how could you ever marry into the crown prince's household? Her face turned stormy at once. Marriage to the crown prince. To her, that was everything. Anyone who could hinder that path was nothing but an enemy. After that conversation, she began avoiding the third prince. If she could avoid him, she would. And if she couldn't, she offered only cold looks and colder silence. Her entire being radiated rejection. Naturally, the third prince noticed. I watched as he forced a smile. His hands clenched tightly beneath his sleeves. And I smiled too. Silently. Satisfied. Half a month later, we returned to the capital. The moment she arrived home, Mingjigi rushed to her mother, recounting every hardship from the past 3 months. Her mother, always doting, was heartbroken. She immediately ordered a grand banquet to celebrate her daughter's return. But halfway through the banquet, a eunuch from the palace arrived. With an imperial decree. The third prince had requested marriage to the minister's legitimate daughter. His Majesty had granted it. When the decree was read, I lifted my gaze. Mingjigi's face had gone pale as death. Our father and the madam were silent, their expressions dark and stormy. Once the eunuch left, the room exploded. Father. Mother. I don't want to marry the third prince. Mingjigi wept, her voice hoarse with panic. How could I marry him? The princess already promised, just 1 more month, and His Majesty would make me crown princess. Father, mother, please, think of something. You must. Her mother looked like she was in agony, her voice trembling. Husband, if we let her marry the third prince, her whole life will be ruined. We must not let this happen. Our father clutched his head, the cries and pleas pounding in his ears like a drum. That was when I stepped forward. Kneeling down. I'm willing, for the sake of father, mother, and my elder sister, to resolve this. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. What solution do you have? Father asked coldly. He had never cared for me. I answered slowly. The imperial edict only says the legitimate daughter of the minister's household. It does not name anyone. In other words, it doesn't and oppose necessarily have to be her. Is there another legitimate daughter in the minister's household besides me? Meng Jigi blurted out instinctively. That was when father finally understood the deeper meaning in my words. You intend to marry into the third prince's household. I lifted my head. My gaze was unwavering, my posture devoted. As though every word I said was for the good of the minister's house. Father, if sister becomes the crown princess, the minister's lineage will be firmly entrenched at the empire's core. But if she is forced to marry the third prince, wouldn't all your years of planning go to waste? But if I were to marry in her place, she can preserve her image and continue her connection with the crown prince. Meanwhile, I, inside the third prince's household, can observe, report, and pass intelligence on his every move. 2 birds, 1 arrow. Father fell silent. But from the looks exchanged between the madam and Meng Jigi, I could tell they were swayed. To them, as long as Meng Jigi wasn't the one marrying the third prince, who did, hardly mattered. That same night, father and madam shut their doors and held a long discussion. By dawn, I had their answer. They agreed. Within days, my name was formally entered under madam's household registry. From an illegitimate nobody, I became the second legitimate daughter of the minister's household, recognized, proper, and titled. Meng Jigi only sneered, eyes full of scorn. To her, I was nothing but a placeholder. A pawn. She didn't and oppose, want to marry the third prince, so I would suffer that fate in her stead. The imperial edict set the wedding for 3 months later. To save face for the household, Madam ordered the servants to begin preparations. But it was done perfunctorily, just enough to avoid public disgrace. No one truly cared. Not that I minded. While I prepared for the marriage in peace, Meng Jigi began scheming, seeking every opportunity to cross paths with the crown prince. Ever since he gifted the Guqin to Du Xuanqiao, she had borne a grudge. Their rivalry turned increasingly vicious, conducted in the shadows, causing no shortage of drama and scandal in the capital and Oppo's noble circles. When Princess Xuanjia returned to the capital, no one was more delighted than Meng Jigi. That very day, she brought generous gifts and visited the princess in person. She returned beaming, her joy difficult to hide. Princess Xuanjia had been away for years. To celebrate her return, the Empress Dowager hosted a grand banquet at the palace, inviting all high-ranking officials and noblewomen. In the past, father would never have allowed me to attend. But now, I was a legitimate daughter. More than that, I was the third prince's fiancée. After a moment's hesitation, father allowed me to go. At the banquet, the empress suddenly raised the topic of the crown prince's wedding. Your Majesty, our son is now 16. Is it not time he chose a crown princess? I noticed the emperor's brow twitch slightly, though his expression quickly returned to normal. Did she already have someone in mind? After a thoughtful pause, the empress turned to Princess Xuanjia. The young ladies of the capital are also talented. It's hard to choose. Perhaps Her Highness has a recommendation. Tension shot through Meng Jigi's posture. Thankfully for her, the princess smiled gently and said, This palace finds the eldest daughter of the minister's household quite outstanding. I even took her as my disciple not long ago. What do your majesties think? The empress nodded with approval. I find her excellent as well. Your Majesty. The emperor looked at Meng Jigi. His gaze was unreadable. After a long silence, he slowly nodded. Very well. Let us go with the Empress Dowager's and Empress's choice. It was settled. Ming Jigi rose at once to give thanks, her smile practically blooming. But she hadn't expected what came next. The crown prince suddenly stood. Father, I've long admired the daughter of the Grand Censor. I wish to take her as a secondary consort. He meant Du Xuanqiao. The moment the words left his mouth, the emperor's face darkened. Foolish. The empress paled, hastily rising and kneeling. Your Majesty, the prince has had a bit too much wine. He is not thinking clearly. Please forgive him. If he's so unclear, then let him sober up outside. Don't embarrass us here. The head eunuch signaled for guards to escort the crown prince out. The smile on Meng Jigi's face froze. She stared blankly ahead, stunned speechless. The crown prince had just humiliated her. In front of the entire court. For the rest of the feast, she sat with her head bowed, face pale, looking utterly lost. That evening, upon returning to the Meng household, a reward was delivered directly from the palace. It came from the empress herself. The lead eunuch bowed low and declared. Her Majesty bids this servant inform Lady Meng, the imperial marriage decree will be issued soon. You need only prepare for the wedding. Joy flickered again on her face. But once the palace servants left, the smile vanished entirely. Thinking of something else, she clenched her teeth, trembling with fury. Mother. I underestimated Du Xuanqiao. Who would have thought she'd seduce the crown prince while I was away? The madam didn't look much better. She scanned the room, then shook her head. This, we'll speak privately. Though I didn't remain to eavesdrop, I already knew what they were discussing. How to plan for the future, once the crown prince ascended the throne. Now, His Majesty had denied his request to marry Du Xuanqiao. But once he became emperor. One word from him, and she could be brought into the palace, legitimately. The next day, Ming Jigi herself confirmed my suspicions. Meng Fuan, she said coldly, think of a way. I want Du Xuanqiao utterly ruined. Her voice dripped with venom. Each word cold as ice. She wanted the deed done. But didn't want to dirty her own hands. As always, the task fell to me. Elder sister, Du Xuanqiao has rarely gone out lately. It won't be easy to strike directly. But, what if we start with the Li family's second son? He was the one Du Xuanqiao secretly loved. Meng Jigi frowned. You want me to help them be together? I shook my head, eyes fixed on hers. Would you really be content to see her live happily ever after? Of course not. Her answer came instantly, without hesitation. If this had been months ago, she might not have cared. As long as Du Xuanqiao didn't compete for the crown prince. But now. She hated her. That hatred clotted like blood in the heart, heavy, unmoving, unforgettable. Elder sister, I whispered, yesterday I happened to hear something. Apparently, the second young master of the Li family has fallen for a courtesan. He and Appo's even planning to marry her as his primary wife. Is that true? Meng Jigi frowned, skeptical. 100% true, I said with certainty. Leaning closer, I whispered a few more words in her ear. At once, her eyes lit up with cruel delight. Do as you planned. I want Du Xuanqiao to be so disgraced, she won't dare show her face again. Not long after Ming Jigi was betrothed to the crown prince, the capital was rocked by scandal. Du Xuanqiao, the Grand Censor's eldest daughter, was seen at a Qinglo, a brothel, engaged in a fierce argument with a courtesan. The second son of the Li family rushed in, pushing Du Xuanqiao aside without a word and shielding the courtesan behind him. The crowd exploded. Onlookers multiplied by the second. In the end, Du Xuanqiao fled with her face covered, her entourage scrambling after her in panic. Those with political agendas wasted no time reporting the incident to His Majesty. His face darkened. Only days ago, the crown prince had expressed a desire to take Du Xuanqiao as a secondary consort. Now she was caught weeping and shouting in a brothel over a man. Worse still, the man, without hesitation, chose the courtesan over her. A slap to the crown prince's face, before all of society. His Majesty, whether fond of the crown prince or not, could not ignore such insult. With only a few words, he ordered the Grand Censor and Minister of Rights docked several months of salary. I don't know how those officials reacted behind closed doors. I only know this, the courtesan vanished not long after. Days later, Ming Jigui and Du Xuanqiao crossed paths on the main street. Old grudges and fresh hatred collided. The two erupted in public, exchanging harsh words before a gathering crowd. When the news reached me, I was calmly sipping tea at a tea house. Across from me sat Princess Xuanjia. I wasn't oppose, tea surprised. Ming Jigui's maid was my person. And I had eyes on Du Xuanqia, too. With just a gentle nudge, their mutual hatred had done the rest. Princess Xuanjia lifted her cup and gave a soft, amused smile. The crown prince has grown increasingly arrogant these past years. His Majesty has long lost patience with him. What he blurted out at the banquet. He's digging his own grave. Princess Xuanjia and the current emperor did not share the same mother. His Majesty's birth mother had been a lesser consort. She died of a blood disorder shortly after giving birth. He was raised under the care of Consort Yu, later marrying the eldest daughter of the Grand Chancellor. With the support of Consort Yu and the Chancellor's house, he rose to the throne. Consort Yu, of course, is now the Empress Dowager. I smiled and said softly, Your Highness, the court already treats the crown prince as the heir apparent. The Chancellor's house grows ever more bloated, feasting, flattering, parading their power. Among all the princes, the crown prince alone holds overwhelming influence. And so, he becomes ever more arrogant. But which emperor would tolerate a son so brazen? Still breathing, yet already eyeing the Daean throne. Her eyes gleamed with ice and ambition. Wait, she said, smirking, the capital will soon be in chaos. And when the dust settles, everything that should be mine, will be mine. There was no need to hide it anymore. Her ambition had been sharpened over many years. It was ready. I rose and bowed deeply. Fuan offers her sincerest wishes, may your highness achieve all that your heart desires. Eventually, the scandal between Meng Jigui and Du Xuanqiao reached His Majesty. My father was reprimanded. The father who had always favored Meng Jigui, for the first time, returned from court and lashed out at her. She cried in fury and humiliation, tears brimming. I seized the chance, stepped close, and whispered, Sister, after this, even if His Highness still had feelings for Du Xuanqiao, he would never dare show them again. She can't marry into the Li family either. In the end, this is a good thing. Ming Jigui's face eased slightly. She nodded, her tone still proud. You're right. But she was never one to be satisfied easily. Half a month later, her younger cousin was formally engaged to the Li family's second son. The wedding date. Exactly 1 month after Ming Jigui was to marry into the Eastern Palace. When Du Xuanqiao heard, she ran into Meng Jigui on the street, eyes red, brimming with hatred as if she could tear her limb from limb. Ming Jigui. From this day on, I swear. We are enemies till death. Meng Jigui sneered. Du Xuanqiao, you chose to oppose me. Now bear the consequences. What right do you have to challenge me? Beside her, the cousin smirked, equally arrogant. Elder sister is the future crown princess. And you? What are you? What's there to be jealous of? Behind them, I stood quietly, watching the three of them. They had once called each other sisters, laughing, embracing, pretending to be close. Back then, I was just a plaything for them to mock. A joke to amuse themselves. When I was at my lowest, they had wanted to see me fight a dog for food. It was a half-starved stray. Sharp claws, jagged fangs. I was 7 years old. I struggled for over an hour, but I couldn't snatch the bun from the dog's jaws. Instead, my clothes were torn, and I nearly lost an arm. They weren't pleased. They had wagered on the outcome. If I failed, Du Xuanxia would lose the bet. Enraged, she lashed me with a whip. Mercilessly. It hurt. But I didn't dodge. Pain was endurable. Defiance. That could get me killed. The Ming household needed only a dog that obeyed. The cousin had once said, "If she won't behave, lock her up and starve her. Let sister vent her anger." Meng Jigi agreed. So they locked me in a windowless room. No day, no night. They said 3 days. But when the servants came on the 3rd day, Meng Jigi simply asked, "She's not dead yet?" When told I was still alive, she replied indifferently, "Then let her starve longer." I nearly died in that airless cell. Now, Meng Jigi and Du Xuanxia were mortal enemies. Her cousin fawned over her constantly. But I could see the jealousy in her eyes, burning, bitter, impossible to hide. She came from a decent background, but a tier below the monks. One was now the crown princess-to-be. The other, married off to a man once disgraced and disowned. How could she accept that? I married before Meng Jigi into the 3rd prince's household. At our wedding, his eyes were full of warmth and joy. Was it love? Not in the least. What thrilled him were the benefits I brought. And I only intended to use him too. Half a month later, Meng Jigi married into the Eastern Palace, officially becoming the crown princess. 2 daughters from the Ming household entering the royal court within a month. The entire capital buzzed with fascination. Families sent congratulatory scrolls by the dozens. The gates of Ming Mansion were nearly trampled flat. But it all ended when the crown prince faltered in his duties and was publicly reprimanded by His Majesty before the entire court. The crime wasn't grave. But His Majesty was furious, stripping him of numerous powers. Any minister who dared speak up in his defense was also scolded into silence. From that day forward, the crown prince made blunder after blunder. Every court session ended in humiliation. Eventually, the emperor thundered, "If you fail once more, don't even dream of keeping the title of crown prince." Officials fell to their knees in unison, pleading. The crown prince's seat was no trivial matter. To crown or to depose was to shake the nation's foundation. That day, the 3rd prince returned home with a smile he couldn't hide. As soon as he entered, he swept me into his arms. "Fuwan. Father summoned me in private today. He said if the crown prince is deposed, he and Oppos, LL name me heir." I smiled gently, eyes curving with warmth. "Then allow me to offer my deepest congratulations, Your Highness." He kissed my cheek with excitement, eyes sparkling. "Fuwan, will you bear me the empire's first grandson?" I wrapped my arms around his neck, lips curving sweetly. "I will." The crown prince rebelled faster than I expected. The very next day after I confirmed my pregnancy, news arrived from Princess Xuanjia. The crown prince was preparing to revolt. He believed both Princess Xuanjia and the Empress Dowager were on his side. So much so that he confided his entire plan to them, convinced they would help him seize the throne. Even I received a letter from Meng Jigi. She instructed me to take the imperial Dayan robe she had prepared and quietly place it in the 3rd prince's study. The crown prince's plan was simple. After killing the emperor and seizing power, he would blame everything on the 3rd prince. Meng Jigi even tried to reassure me. Once the rebellion succeeded and the crown prince ascended, he would issue an imperial edict to dissolve my marriage with the 3rd prince, ensuring I remained untouched by the scandal. But I knew better. If I truly did as she said, once the dust settled and I was no longer useful, I would be the first to be discarded. So instead, I brought the letter she gave me straight to the 3rd prince. After reading it, he clenched his fists, eyes flashing with killing intent. I never once vied for power under the sun, he said coldly, yet he still wants me dead. Very well. From this moment on. Don't blame me for showing no mercy. He pulled me into his arms, voice low but stirred with emotion. Fuan, you've done well. Once this is over, you'll be my crown princess. I simply smiled, saying nothing. The crown prince made his move. He believed victory was within reach. But the rebellion ended almost before it began. That day, the imperial palace was the most dangerous place in the empire. I stayed within the third prince's residence, not stepping out even once. Princess Xuanjia, fearing for my safety, had secretly dispatched guards to protect me. When the chaos finally settled, I received word from her. Everyone involved in the rebellion had been captured, including the Grand Chancellor's house and the Ming family. The third prince, who had rushed to protect the emperor, was stabbed once. But thankfully the wound wasn't fatal. His arm had been slashed, blood soaked through his robe. But he had guarded the emperor to the very end. He returned 3 days later. The former crown prince had been stripped of all titles, reduced to a commoner, and imprisoned in the heavenly prison. Thanks to his valor, the third prince was named the new crown prince and immediately moved into the eastern palace. Naturally, I accompanied him into the palace. But it didn't take long before voices of dissent arose. Many officials submitted memorials, accusing me of being the descendant of traitors, unfit to be crown princess. The new crown prince seized the opportunity and reported to the emperor. The crown princess is carrying a royal heir. The court fell into stunned silence. No one dared speak further. But then, the Grand Mentor, who had always maintained neutrality, stepped forward. He knelt in the center of the hall, tears falling as he bowed deeply. Your Majesty. The crown princess's mother was my long-lost daughter. Years ago, she was kidnapped. I searched for her endlessly, only to discover she was killed by the Meng household. She left behind one child, your crown princess. He lifted his head, voice firm and resolute. Your Majesty, the Meng household is unworthy to be considered her maternal kin. I humbly beg you to sever all ties between the crown princess and the Mengs. From this day forth, let her belong only to the house of the Grand Mentor. The crown prince also knelt, adding his voice to the plea. The emperor nodded his assent. I felt no surprise. Back in Suzhou, the third prince had already uncovered the truth of my origins. That was why he accepted the marriage proposal. He would never have taken a neglected concubine's daughter from the Meng household as his official wife. No matter how many schemes I devised behind the scenes. Feelings meant nothing. Only bloodlines and status mattered. But the Grand Mentor's household. They didn't reach out to me until 5 days ago. 5 days after the new crown prince was declared. They, too, had no need for a useless granddaughter. Unless she was already the crown princess. And a likely future empress. I chose a day, and went to the heavenly prison. The imperial decree had been issued. The former crown prince, execution. All members of his household, exiled to a bitter northern frontier, never to return. The Meng household was declared complicit. My father, beheaded, like the crown prince. Madame and Mingji Gi, exiled to the borderlands. At least, mother and daughter would have each other. After half a month, I saw Mingji Gi again. She was nearly unrecognizable. Hair disheveled, clothes tattered, face pale. When she saw me enter, her eyes burned with hatred. But she swallowed it down, forced herself to bow. Fuan, please. Save me. I beg you. You're the crown princess now. Just say one word, just one. I'll stay. I'll do anything. I'll be a servant, a maid, I'll serve you my whole life, just don't send me away. Once, she stood high above, deciding whether I lived or died. Now she knelt at my feet, like a dog. I had never felt such satisfaction. I smiled coldly. Sister, you really do look like a dog right now. Her lips twitched, face contorted. Yet she forced herself to smile, to flatter. If you'll help me, call me whatever you want. I leaned in. And what sound does a dog make? Sister, surely, you don't mind giving me a sample. She clenched her fists, trembling. After a long moment, she finally bit her lip and muttered, barely louder than breath. Woof. That faint sound swallowed her pride along with her voice. In her eyes, I saw my past self. Kneeling. Begging. Wagging my tail just to survive. The same girl she once looked at with contempt and said, Fuan really is a good little dog. Today, I returned it, word for word. Sister, you truly are a good little dog. Her jaw clenched. She forced it down, her hatred, her humiliation. She lifted her head again, pleading. Fuan, is this not enough? I stepped forward slowly, bending down to meet her eyes. My voice was soft, like a spring breeze. But to her, it must have sounded like frost. Sister, your performance was so convincing. But how unfortunate. I never intended to save you. Her face drained of color. White as a corpse. The final layer of pretense shattered. She could no longer maintain the fragile illusion of weakness. Her face twisted in despair, and she screamed like a madwoman. Fuan. Do you truly intend to drive me to death? I lifted my head. My voice, like a blade. I never wanted this, but Mengjigi, did you ever show me mercy? All I ever wished for was a quiet life with my mother. But you killed her. And you never once thought to leave me a path to live. So don't blame me for tearing a way out of the dead end you forced me into. In the imperial prison, I happened to encounter her little cousin. Her family had aligned with the crown prince's treason. Now, they too were imprisoned. She collapsed to her knees, begging me for help. I passed by without so much as a glance. That very day, the crown prince and my father were beheaded. The former empress was stripped of title and confined to the cold palace. Unable to bear the disgrace, she hanged herself with a white silk ribbon. When word reached the emperor, he showed no reaction. Cold as stone. Once, they said that back when he was a prince, he loved the empress deeply, never leaving her side. The two had been a royal fairy tale. But in the palace, how much of love is real? Even sincerity can be faked. True hearts can turn cold. Perhaps he had once loved her. But in the end, he endured her for years. On the day Mengjigi and her mother were exiled to the borderlands, I stood atop the city wall, watching silently. As the carriage passed beneath, Mengjigi looked up. Her gaze locked on mine, refusing to look away. But we were too far. I couldn't tell whether her eyes held hatred or despair. After the third prince ascended as crown prince, he was endlessly busy. Busy flattering his father. Busy courting officials. Busy building prestige. And even busy secretly selecting a secondary consort. He thought he hid it well. But I knew. He had been in contact with Du Xuanxiao. In fact, I was certain, within a year, he would submit a memorial requesting her as his concubine. Since he wished to keep secrets, I played Aang. Calmly, I stayed in the Eastern Palace to rest and nourish the child in my womb. When I had time, I carried Princess Xuanzhou's token and came and went from her residence as I pleased, sometimes even staying a few days. The Grand Preceptor's household frequently sent people to inquire after my health, claiming to care for me, inviting me to visit my family. They played their parts well. Regretful, apologetic, eager to make amends. I didn't refuse. I responded kindly, and every few days, I would go to the Grand Preceptor's home and perform the show of filial piety. Meanwhile, the emperor's health declined with each passing day. After the scandal with the crown prince and the deposed empress, his body had already been failing. Now, it withered faster. But he refused to surrender. He had lived a life of conquest, glory, and dominance. And he longed for immortality. He issued proclamations across the land, seeking those who could grant him eternal life. Many came forward. In mere months, he tried all manner of pills, herbs, secret formulas. On the surface, he seemed spirited. Inside, hollowed out. Those months passed. And I, 10 months pregnant, gave birth to the imperial heir, the first son of the crown prince. The Huang Zhengxuan, the first imperial grandson. His Majesty showered us with extravagant rewards. I held my newborn, swaddled tightly in silks. Slowly, I smiled. All those years of acting were finally nearing their end. On the infant's 1-month celebration, His Majesty, overcome with joy, collapsed on the spot. Imperial physicians tried everything, but they couldn't save him. That night, the emperor died. A nation cannot be without a ruler for even a day. The next morning, the crown prince ascended the throne. He granted amnesty to the realm. And I, holding my son, took my place upon the phoenix throne. From that day on, I was empress of the empire. 3 months later, Du Xuanqiao entered the palace. Before she did, His Majesty even pretended to ask my opinion. Of course, I smiled graciously and voiced my support. On her first day in the palace, she was granted the title of Consort Xuan. When she came to greet me, her ambition could no longer be hidden. It blazed in her eyes. But her face remained respectful. Her posture perfect. She bowed to me as if I were her mother. From then on, His Majesty spent more than half his time in her quarters. Sometimes, even on his way to my palace, he would abruptly change course. The maids by my side were outraged. Your Majesty, Consort Xuan is clearly provoking you. I replied calmly. It's fine. She won't be happy for long. And neither will His Majesty. After 2 straight weeks in her bed, the emperor suddenly collapsed mid-audience. 3 days later, he woke. The diagnosis, poisoning. While he lay unconscious, I took the opportunity to cleanse the harem. I sealed the palace, forbade all entry and exit. I personally ordered the search. The result. The culprit was none other than Consort Xuan. By the time the emperor regained consciousness, she had already been sentenced to death. As for him, he lived. But half his body was paralyzed. He could not speak. Could not stand. Only rasped weakly upon the day in bed. I stepped forward, gently held his hand. Rest easy, Your Majesty. During your 3-day coma, Princess Xuanjia oversaw court affairs. The empire remains stable. He trembled violently. His eyes burned with hatred. The hand I held shook uncontrollably. I softly wiped his brow with a silk cloth, smiling tenderly. Empress Dowager has agreed as well. Please rest and recover. I will help raise Tu Hien to become a worthy heir. Tu Hien, our son. His fingers spasmed harder. He turned red with fury but could not utter a single word. Eventually, he fainted again. I slowly released his hand, turned to accept a clean towel from a maid, and delicately wiped my fingers, as if they had touched something filthy. All around, the eunuchs and maidservants were my people. No one made a sound. This illness wouldn't kill him. But he'd never live like a man again. Tu Hien was still swaddled in cloth. The empire could not be leaderless. Thus, only one option remained. Appoint the eldest princess as regent. I did not object, because I knew my own limits. Heaven bestows fortune as it pleases. To overreach is to invite ruin. Besides, the moment I stepped onto this chessboard, I knew it would all come to this. In the 5th year of the princess's regency, the Grand Preceptor was accused of embezzling disaster relief funds, selling ranks and offices. The charges were irrefutable. He was immediately imprisoned. In a single day, his entire household was raided. Those involved were executed. The less guilty, exiled. I watched with my own eyes as the Grand Preceptor was beheaded at the execution ground. That day, I brought a box of pastries to pay respects at my mother's grave. Years ago, after she died, Father threw her body into the pauper's graveyard. No burial. No mourning. Her corpse, never found. Later, when I gained some power, all I could do was erect a false tomb. An empty coffin beneath the earth, a silent offering to the wind. It wasn't until His Majesty fell ill that I could openly, proudly, mourn her. I stood before the grave, my voice as light as wind, yet each word sliced open the past like a knife. Mother, your daughter has avenged you. Those who trampled us are all dead. Mengji Gi. Her stepmother. Gone. I'd received word months ago. They had fallen ill years back. No money, no help, no mercy. Left to rot between life and death. They finally perished, like stray dogs by the roadside. I remembered. The day I turned 5. My mute mother clutched my hand, her tears falling endlessly. She could not speak. But her eyes, in those final moments, brimmed with longing and reluctance to part. That day, she took me by the hand to kneel before the Ming family gates. As the servants dragged me inside, she stood weeping in the rain, using trembling hands to gesture. Live. You must live. She would never have done it if she had any other choice. She knew her fate. And she knew it would be the last time I saw her. Yet she still did it. She gave up her life to buy me the thinnest sliver of hope. I knelt before the empty grave, my tears soaking into the dirt. Mother. I lived. I lived well. So very well. If your spirit watches from above, please rest easy. I didn't just live for myself. I lived for vengeance, for justice, and to reclaim my life. Side story, Ming Fu Van. Mother brought me to the Meng estate so I might survive. But what awaited me was nothing short of hell. My stepmother despised me. The servants followed suit, abusing and humiliating me daily. To them, my life was worth less than a dog's. But I could not die. I refused to die. For my mother. For our vengeance. For the unfinished road I still had to walk. I learned to endure. To behave. To become a loyal, obedient mutt. I dared not defy my stepmother. Dared not resist Mengji Gi. I trained myself to smile while bleeding inside. To crawl, so I would and oppose, be trampled to death. The first time I met Princess Xuanjia was at a palace flower banquet. Once again, I became a spectacle. A nameless, rootless orphan for nobles to laugh at. But that day, Princess Xuanjia intervened. Her cold voice silencing the ridicule. From that moment, I carved her image into my heart. Step by step, I studied her. Learned to read situations. Learned how to survive as the strong. Learned what it meant to become someone who could change the world. Years of reading Faces to Survive had sharpened my instincts. From a glance, a voice, a breath, I could sense what someone was thinking. That petty skill never once failed me against Mengji Gi or her stepmother. At age 8, I knelt in a remote corridor, alone, and blocked Princess Xuanjia's path. I kowtowed and begged. Your Highness, please grant me a chance. Fu Van will serve you with everything I have, even as a beast of burden. I was small. But my tone was resolute. It made the princess pause. She asked me coldly. What can you offer me? I had nothing. Nothing but resolve. So I bowed deeply and whispered, "From today on, my life belongs to you." Even though I knew my life was worth less than dust. The princess asked, "And what do you want from me?" I kowtowed thrice, tears choking my voice. "I want vengeance for my mother. She wanted me to live on. But, forgive me, mother. I cannot forget this hatred. I cannot live pretending none of it happened. If I must give my life for revenge, then so be it." That day, Princess Xuanjia agreed. Later, I once asked her, "Why did you choose to help an 8-year-old child with nothing?" She stood quietly by her writing desk. Incense coiled lazily upward. Outside, a plum blossom had bloomed too early. She gazed at it, then said, "Because in that child's eyes, there was no pleading, only the will to survive. A child like that, left to rot, would be a waste of a blade unsharpened." She turned, eyes distant, lips curling into a half-smile. To kneel does not mean you are weak. But to kneel without losing your pride means you're someone who will rise higher than anyone else. The end.